I said just a minute ago, we have a lot of very fresh experience. We were out last night having a few drinks and a nice dinner with a publisher. So how very, very relevant. So before we sort of dive into it, I thought I'd give a bit of a brief history of publishers in Australia, because they have a bit of a reputation, and some of it fair, some of it unfair. There was a time in the industry in Australia where the large studios were dominated by overseas publishers, and it was really seen as like I guess like a cheap outsourcing location for a lot of these big studios. And you know, as we all know, with the PFC and other events, that all sort of collapsed, and fairly or unfairly, a lot of publishers were tainted with that, with being responsible for a lot of that stuff. So for a long time, there was a bit of an anti-publisher sentiment within the industry. I think that's changing, and I think you know, what those publishers represent and what publishers are now are quite different. And you know, they're an essential part of the ecosystem of the game industry, and so without you know, having a good relationship with publishers around the world, we won't be able to grow our industry here in Australia. And so I think when you talk to people, you will probably still see some of those hang-ups from bad experiences in the past, but make sure you put that in context, that you're not sort of going in with you make sure you've got up-to-date information, I guess, is the take there. So what do publishers do? I mean, if they are important part of the system, what is it they actually do? Very simply, they publish games. that's sort of their trick. You know, they take products to market. They invest in teams of people to build those products. They do marketing. They negotiate on your behalf with platforms. You know, they find opportunities for you and your product that you probably wouldn't be able to do yourself. They have expertise that you don't have, basically, and that's why you go to a publisher, and that's why you know, they're an important part of that system. They're able to do things at scale that you can't do as an individual. But on the flip side, they also don't exist without games. You know, publishing games is their core. So if they don't have games, they don't exist. So they want what you've got. they want games, right? So it means that when you are talking to a publisher, you're not powerless in that negotiation. Like the things that you have value, and you need to make sure that you're not just giving it away. That's not to say publishers don't have power, but they're not. You know, you don't have to bend over backwards to take. You know, and I think Tony will go into some of the deal terms and the deal structures that you would expect from publishers a little bit later. So this, you know, why do publishers do it? Why do they, of all the things that they could be doing with their life, why do they publish games? And the easy answer here is because they want to make money, right? I mean, it's a business, and the business, you know, ships products and makes a profit. What I think is what we've learned, sort of hopefully from last week and the exercise we went through, these companies will have their own vision, their own values, and they'll, you know, yes, they want to be profitable and grow, but they also want to do it in a particular way, and they want to address particular parts of the market. So you want to understand why they publish the games that they do, understand their values, and look for alignment. And I touched on it last week, but again, there's the public values that they'll put on their website and in their marketing materials, and then there's their lived values. And so make sure that you're checking in with companies that have worked with them. Look at their portfolio. It's pretty easy to find the developers. And particularly at a conference like GDC or Gamescom, you can probably find someone from that studio and talk to them about whether the values that they state are aligned with the values that they, with the way they actually behave. You'll find that the industry is pretty happy to talk, and bad reputations move very quickly. So, you know, on the flip side, make sure that you're managing your own reputation there. But also be aware that everyone's experience will be different. Companies change over time, personnel changes. So, you know, oftentimes we found that there's been a bad egg at a studio that's caused a lot of trouble for you know, at publishers, sorry, that's caused some lot of problems for studios. And once they move on, the reputation can change very, very quickly. So, you know, be aware that I'm not saying give them a pass on everything, but go in with your eyes open and understand what the problems were, where they were originated from, what they've done to address it. And don't be afraid to ask, you know, say, look, I've heard this, you know, how can you make me feel comfortable that's not going to be a continuing problem?
Yeah, and the flip side of that is, because of that same movement, you might get someone who's been working really well with you for a publisher, you can do another publisher, use that door to get in and have a look.
Yeah, definitely. Like, it's all about relationships. So what do publishers actually look at? from my experience, this is sort of the three things that they look at, and these is kind of the order that they look at it in. So the first thing they wanted to look at is your team, which is good because you can, you're all nice, right? You're all great people. So this should be the easy one. But what they're looking for there is they know that there's going to be tough times in the development of a product, and they want to know that they can talk to you openly and honestly and have a relationship with you that's not going to cause them problems. But they're also looking for experience to make sure that they know that that what you're in for and what you can do there. So yeah, like experience, that sort of thing can be good, but they're willing to take a punt on new teams if they feel that they can help you and that you will listen and that you'll actually respond well. They look at your product, obviously. They want to make sure that you're building something that they can sell. Usually the reason they look at this, is obviously to sort of check quality, but they all know that this will change and evolve as the product develops. But they want to make sure that it's a segment of the market that they have expertise in, that they can add value to, and that it's something that can help stand out from that crowd. And finally, they sort of look at the cost. So once they've kind of gone through that filter, so yes, this is a team that I can picture myself working with for a few years. This is a product that I can get behind and really get motivated to go out there and sell. How much is this going to cost us, right? Like, how much do we need to pay for development? How much do we need to pay for marketing? What's the market opportunity here in terms of what's the likely return? Like, we're not overselling a product into a niche, or at least underselling a niche product into a large market. And they're also balancing that against opportunity cost, because by working with you, they're not working with someone else. It gets back to that old adage that the most limited resource is time. And so they're going to be careful about where they invest their time, because they know that they can only support so many products, for each person. So they're going to curate what they put their energy behind. And so, for your sake, you should be looking at the portfolio of this publisher and ask yourself the question: can I see my game in their portfolio? Right? Like, so this is work that they will be doing as well. But if you can do it first, it saves a lot of time in that conversation. If there's no fit, then don't try and shoehorn it in. There can be like a temptation to say, look, well, we're doing a shooter game. You guys don't have a shooter game. Therefore, all your resources will fall behind us to make this, like, we don't have any competition in that space. But remember, like, we're going to publishers because we want expertise. And if they don't have expertise in the shooter space, then they're going to be just as green as you. And then you're not going to give your product the best chance to.
Alternatively, if they don't like the market that your game is going to be, they'll be pretty open and honest right up front. They're not into wasting anyone's time. So just be prepared for that. It's completely cool. Yeah, they're pretty,
like, so one of the best conferences to go to, I mean, GDC is great, but at Gamescom, they have a matchmaking system where you get half an hour appointments, and they back to back. And so many times I sat down with somebody and they said, hey, so what are you building? And we say, well, we make casual games for the female market on mobile. And they're like, okay, thanks, bye. That's it. And then you're like, oh, well, that was brief. But it's good. It's much better to know that than go down the path of trying to shoehorn something in where it doesn't fit. It comes down to not just genre and stuff as well, but also scale. If they haven't pushed a game, if they're focused on the big end of the market and you're doing small indie stuff, or vice versa, if they're a small indie publisher and you're doing something quite big and blockbuster, again, like, it may be tempting because they'll probably be excited by it as well, or see the opportunity there. But you've got to make sure that there's a fit on both sides. Otherwise, you're setting both of you up for failure, I guess, or at least you're not going to be able to realize as much of the return as you probably could. So then, look, the next step after you've done this hard work, after you've looked at the publishers, you've understood what it is that they want, you should start the conversation. And I know, like, a lot of you are going to GDC and you've got a bunch of meetings lined up, but I would suggest that you shouldn't be starting the conversation then. You should be talking to them now. You should be reaching out and understanding what it is that they want to see, what the presentation, what they would like you to show. Tony will touch on that a little bit later as well. Obviously, you don't want to start the conversation when you've just got an idea that's written down on the back of a napkin or something. No one likes to sit in a meeting where you're going like, how about unicorns with lasers? It's like, you want to make sure you've got a developed idea, that you've thought about the market and stuff like that. Like, again, Tony will touch on that stuff. But you're starting a relationship with somebody, and I think the next point here is important as well. You're not talking to a company; you're talking to a person. And so you want to build a relationship with that person over time. you know, they're just like everybody else. You know, they're going to want to see the best in you. They want to believe it. You know, okay, there are some jaded people out there who will be very short and curt and probably a bit brusque. But you know, ultimately they got into this industry because they're really fascinated about games and the types of creators and people there. And like I say, they're looking for the team and the talent as much as they're looking for that product, because they know that talented teams will create good product over time. And so the relationship is very valuable to them. And you know, these are people whose job it is to go out and talk to hundreds of developers and talk to, you know, try and find that next big thing. And you know, they're used to seeing products in every state of development. So don't be afraid to show things that are early. They're used to seeing prototypes that are just grey boxing. They're used to seeing, you know, concept art. They understand the process. So you don't have to be shy or reluctant to share information with them. But they'll have the context to know where it's at. They're not going to ping you for something that you don't have, as long as you have an answer for what you're going to do. So show them your GDD, show them your prototype, show concept art. And the earlier you can do it, the better. And because again, like if there's not going to be a fit, you'd much rather find out before you've flown all the way over to San Francisco and sat down and had a meeting for them to say, nah, this isn't for us. So, you know, save you both of you the time and the money. That meeting, you could have been speaking to another publisher that is a better fit. And one thing I always say for any of these meetings is ask them for advice, right? Like everyone loves to be the expert. He's reading my notes now. And so like everyone loves to have their ego stroked to a certain degree, and which is, as I put in my notes here, how do you think Jens got me to do these talks? So, you know, if you put them in the position of expertise, I'd love to be able to share the knowledge of all the things that they've seen and that they've done and that they've seen work and not work. And I think the worry that a lot of developers have is like, you know, if I reveal too much of what I'm doing, someone might steal my idea, or they might, you know, they might sort of run away with it. And the reality of this industry is it's so massive that there probably is someone doing what you're doing. Like, you know, it's hard to come up with a wholly unique idea in this industry. We're all sort of playing from the same toolkit, you know, in a lot of senses. But I think that's actually a good thing to talk to with the publisher about. You know, when you ask them for advice, you know, I've got some notes here about how sometimes if you talk to a publisher and they say, look, I've seen 100 of these games here, but you know, before, I don't think that you're going to have a chance. That's not a great conversation and not a great relationship to have with a publisher. Good publishers will say, look, I've seen 100 of these games. So here's the areas where I think you need to improve on and to actually stand out. And they can sort of take what can be like a negative and turn it into a positive and an opportunity, right? So that's where the advice can come in, which is, yes, there are 100 of these games. And you know, hopefully they'll even say, look, this is something I haven't seen. Like, you can take what you've done here and put this on top, and this is how you can stand out and actually break out in this market. So leverage their experience, leverage the fact that they've seen hundreds of these games. Like you know your game intimately, they've seen probably thousands of products, right? So like leverage that experience, you know, and also, you know, this is a relationship, and what they're looking for in this relationship is the back and forth. They want to see that if they give you advice, that you'll listen, that you won't, you know, sort of react or push back, that you'll take it on board. And like all relationships, it develops over time. It's very unlikely, I mean, I'm not going to say it never happens, but you're not likely to walk into a meeting with a publisher for the first time and then get an offer, like, and when you walk out the door, right? Like, this is going to be a lot of back and forth. And part of that early testing the relationship will be them saying, hey, these are some things I think you could look at, or some areas you could improve. And you go away, and then you reach out a couple of weeks later and say, hey, look, we took that on board and we've made these changes. And I think either it works this way or it doesn't work this way, but you started a conversation, you started a relationship. You know, when you do get into a deal, you're going to be talking to these people for many months or even years, right? Depending on sort of what sort of the scale of the project you're working on. So this early part of the relationship is really good at establishing those communication paths, establishing the boundaries of what you will and won't do, and understanding where each of your strengths lie. It's a bit like a marriage, is what I've written here. And I'd really deliberately call it a marriage because sometimes it ends in divorce and sometimes it ends in happily ever after, right? So you want to try and stack the odds in your favor as much as you can. And like any actual real life relationship, I mean, it is a real life relationship, but communication is the key here, right? And understanding each other and where your strengths lie. And this is like, there's some discussion here about China and questions here, and I think this is even more true of the Chinese market. Yeah, they're like almost 100% relationship focused. It's like, for them, it's like team number one, and then there's like a distant gap, and then like product comes later. I mean, the Chinese market is a very interesting one, and one that we haven't been able to crack yet. But everyone I know who has got in there and had success has been on the back of years of building relationships with people there. No one walks in and bullies their way into China. China sets the rules. So be sure to find someone who can help you navigate that. There are some great people around that we can recommend, but go to China Joy, go to Gamescom Asia, go to these events, start talking to these people. Even more so than any of the other studios, you need to be thinking long term rather than, very different to the US. US, it's very used to sort of talking big and talking up ambition and talking a big game. China, it's more about just talking about food, talking about life. They sort of go, it's a very different relationship, and one that is built over time. And it's, I guess, like they take time to build trust. It comes down to a trust relationship, right? Everyone wants to believe that you can do the things that you say you can do. They can trust that you can do it. And so like just the cultural differences there mean that they take a little bit longer to build that. So that's coming to the end of my little bit. I'm going to hand over to Tony in a sec. So I thought I'd just introduce him again for those of you who don't know. He's right here. But Tony's got a very sort of unique perspective on publishers because he was one. He was a publisher kind of in a way. So he was the head of studio at 2K Australia, which meant a lot of interaction with the mothership in terms of the 2K infrastructure there and talking to the heads up, the big wigs, and but also has been really, really heavily involved in GDAA and more recently IGEA. And here at Mighty Kingdom as COO, he does a lot of our negotiating with publishers and does all the hard stuff. So I'm going to let him have a talk. I'm going to slowly roll back. He's going to roll forward. And look at this.
That's so is it?
Yeah, you got it.
Right. Cool. Yeah. So I do have a background with publishers, mostly working with 2K and people that they work with, which is mostly Take-Two. As Phil said before, as people move around, it's a fairly small industry. The circle of relationships you build end up being across multi-publishers. So you get to know a lot of people if you hang around. So you've got your meeting. What are you going to do? So you need to be able to present your concept to the publisher and what they're really looking for, other than setting up the relationship and finding out who you are and what your team's like, what experience they have. If you've got a proof of concept of some kind, a playable is absolutely preferred. Put it in front of them. As Phil was saying, it can be anything that gives them the concept, mostly of gameplay. They don't really, if the art's there, the wrapper's on, that's great. But they're more concerned of day-to-day gameplay or minute-to-minute gameplay, and if that's going to be fun, and that's where their primary investment's going to be. If you aren't able to bring that to that meeting, video is pretty cool. So you can show them some gameplay, give them an idea. And realistically, if you've got a GDD or a TDD beforehand to show them you've thought about what we're going to do, that's pretty cool as well. And then you'll get down to basically what's it going to cost? What's the relationship going to be? How big's the team? What will the schedule look like? How long are we in this for? And what's going to cost us? Before you go in there, be clear about what your negotiating terms are, and that's understanding what kind of deal, and we'll go into those just in a second. Make sure you understand what your cost base is, understand what a cost plus is, understand, what kind of margin you'd be looking for in terms of what kind of publisher and what kind of relationship you're looking for. If you've got, this is probably a difference between mobile and console to a large extent. If you've got a mobile game, you've got a soft launch, you've got some statistics, they're going to want to be able to check those. So have them in front of you. So have your retention statistics, your day 1, day 7, day 28 or 30. Look at conversion, what days is the first purchase, that kind of thing, and have a pretty clear monetization strategy. That's going to be easily to understand or into. They usually are. But they're going to know what those things are, and they'll judge you on those things. Some of them, their expectations will be quite unrealistic. I think we were at a meeting last year, and they expected a day one of 75, and a day like 30 or 20.
For those non-mobile developers in the room, that means that of all the people who played today, 75% of them come again and play tomorrow. And the benchmark in the industry is about 40 for a successful title.
Yeah.
And they wanted almost double that.
You know, and then the thing about that is, if they're just kicking your tires, have the conversation, but no, this is going to be a longer term relationship to dig yourself into. And you know, and take it like that. Don't take it as, oh my God, how many that? You're not, and they know it too. Let's look at some of the publishing models that you'll be looking at. Traditional publishing, essentially, you put your concept, they want to go ahead. Essentially, they're looking for them to contribute to your dev costs, looking for a profit share as part of that. And basically, they're taking all the risk, and what you're using them for, what you're working with them for, is specifically their ability to get it to market and to hit your target audience, which, you know, they'll work on you in determining who that is and why that is. So you don't expect a large profit share from that deal. Most publishers offer something aspirational to keep you motivated to you know, do the absolute highest quality game you can actually develop through some kind of aspirational cash bonus. That's a lot probably more on the console side than mobile for sure, which is really around about sales based and time limited as well to some extent. So you might have sell 4 million copies within 3 months, you'll get a $2 million bonus. Don't we wish? The thing for about this is really understanding what they can offer, what they can bring to the table, and understanding what your value is as well. So be very clear on what you believe you're bringing, and that'll come down to negotiation. So as Phil was saying, every conversation you really have with a publisher is always a negotiation until it's signed.
Yeah, and you'll notice that when they start this negotiation, the paid dev will be probably below your cost.
Yeah.
The profit share won't exist, and the sales target is ridiculous. So, you know, they try and, all publishers are different, and some of them start at a more reasonable state, but just go in expecting to be screwed, I guess. And, but yeah, and I think actually you've got this point I was going to make, that it's the upside of this is that it actually, I look at these deals and I think it needs to make sense with just the dev cost, and I don't expect profit share or sales targets. That stuff is sort of gravy. If you build that and expect that, you're probably on the wrong. You know, it's not the right deal. But your point there about, I'll let you finish your point because it's your slide.
Oh, that's cool. I mean, the thing that publishers offer in any model is it's opportunity to work with people who know what they're doing, have done it before, and you can learn from. So, you know, the good conversation that we've always engaged in is really about, well, how can we take some of that capability back into what we do? And that's probably one of our values is we're a partnership. We want to develop some skills. You've got some of those skills. We want to learn from you. And, you know, that's part of the stroking the ego. People are really into that. You know, they want to tell you, hey, I'm really good at this. This is what I can do. So yeah, that's just probably the easiest one. Licensing. This is a tough one. We're at Mighty King in a position where we have both. We pitched for a license we like, or we're picked out for a license someone thinks that we might have a capability in developing. Either way, you've got to understand quite a few things. So looking at a minimum guarantee is something you're looking at pretty specifically. That is basically, you know, the payment that you give back to the publisher to use their IP. Now, that's a real difficult discussion because you're basically valuing their IP for them. Some of them get, you know, really unhappy about what you think the value is, and other times you strike a lucky going, well, I actually thought it was worth way more than that, and I've just got it for half what I expected to. That's an upfront payment. Most of the time, it can be spread, so there'll be an upfront payment, there'll be something on release, something maybe between those two or after. But you know, expect everything from about 100K up. And, you know, I'm not sure it's going to be negotiating for a Marvel or a Disney or a Star Wars, but, you know, that makes it pretty difficult to actually do those kind of deals. So be careful you've got the cash flow to be able to pay off the NG before you even get into a deal. There will be an agreed profit share. So again, this is all about negotiation. I mean, an example is fairly standard. You want to get to is around 85-15, publisher being 15, you being 85. You're taking the risk in this case because you're paying for everything. But it can be anywhere depending on both the publisher and the license that you're looking at, and that's the value of that license. Understand what that's going to be, what the profit share is going to be net, is going to be gross, after platform fees, after marketing costs.
Why am I speaking as you?
It's changed, Marshall.
It's quite a bit, fairly complex. UA spend is often in these, well, yeah, all the time, essentially in these negotiations.
That's user acquisition for those.
Sorry if I'm doing this, but you know, that could, again, 15% is probably fairly standard, whether that's gross or net. Often they'll put in a value, you know, that might have expectation. You can see the contract saying you'll spend $1 million on UA in your first month. Ignore it and just keep on going back for it. With licenses, there might be a release date or an embargo if it's tied to something specific like a product or a film, where you cannot show it to anybody. So that kind of limits you to some extent. When you're say soft launching a product, you're getting your metrics, you're understanding what players are doing. That might not be available to you. So you know, be pretty confident that you're able to succeed in that market without those tests. For us, it's really about we'll look at that in a market we understand, the technology and the gameplay, you know, basically as low risk as possible.
Yeah, I mean, you might be asking yourself, why would I get a license and pay them hundreds of thousands of dollars and then pay for all the development, and then I can't even show it to anybody until I get approval from somebody else who could just pull the plug in any day. But the upside is, like it says at the bottom, you know, if you can pull a good license with the good terms, it overcomes overcomes a lot of the marketing costs, right? So there's different parts of marketing. This is a whole nother presentation, but it's kind of like it improves your conversion. Like, it doesn't reduce the cost of showing the product to lots of people, but if you get 2 games, like one of the classic examples is a Mafia game or a Godfather game. Everyone's like, "Oh, I know the Godfather," so they would install that far more likely than if they just a generic Mafia game. And so it just means your conversions are much higher. It's easier to get people into your product. All the other parts are still the same. You have to have a great product. You have to do all the other parts, you know, really well. It doesn't give you a free pass. But it can be very good. And I know Disney are really actively shopping around their IP right now. Just be careful, because, you know, it might sound fun to get Star Wars as an IP, but there are a lot of Star Wars games competing in a very heavy market. So yeah, that's a brand that the minimum guarantee is going to be very high.
And that's another thing as well. Yeah. For someone like Disney, who has a heap of brands, they'll tell you need to hit this release window, and that's it. Because on either side of that month, we're releasing 10 other ones. So you know, that's your window.
But it is really good. And like Tony says, if you're in a spot where you've got a product, like look at an example of like the Kim Kardashian mobile game, where they had an existing product that was functioning okay, and they put a brand on top of it that allowed it to sort of break out. Like Pokemon Go is another great example of that, where they had an existing model, existing technology, and then the power of that brand sort of took it to the stratosphere. So when you get it right, it can rocket you to the next level. And because you're only paying percentage of gross and not just getting paid a fixed price, the upside can be very, very high if you get it right.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to say that the spreadsheets you make and when doing these details they're huge and complex. But yeah, we help you there. Work for hire. This is probably the easiest, most straightforward, and it's probably, I guess, you've got to be pretty comfortable with what you're trying to do. As the name suggests, it's pretty much pay a fee, develop a product. Essentially, you're required, you know, you do schedule and a GDD, now examples and gameplay, and cost against those. It's probably your premium title as well. So you're looking at your highest rate, charge out rate to be able to do a work for hire, because you're not getting the back end. You're not getting any royalties. You might be able to negotiate something where the royalties come way down the track, but it's fairly unlikely. Again, be careful of things like tie-ins and embargo, where that's going to make things difficult. Essentially, you're probably going to hit a day and date of some kind, and there is no slip. You've got to do it, because if you don't, or if it does slip, the cost is all going to be back on you for the price that you've already agreed. it's pretty difficult to renegotiate a contract halfway through it. And if the game's a hit, that's great. You know, you're not going to get that return, and what you will get though is reputation. So it'll make life easier for the next conversation you have, which could be quite soon, and it could be more about, you know, acquisition. That'll happen as well.
Wait, that a slide coming up?
It could be soon.
Wow.
Second party. It's probably, I guess, rarer these days. But essentially, second party, you're an independent studio, but you're working exclusively for your partner or publisher. Can I have aspects of all those different kind of deals depending on the product you're developing, the publisher. So, you know, be prepared for looking at all the previous things and integrating that into what a second party agreement might look like. They might be a platform owner, they might be a straight up publisher. It really is dependent on what value they're bringing to the table when you're working with them. Yep, royalty share is something you absolutely should expect. 50% is probably the minimum you want to start with, negotiate up or down from there. So, you know, throw in 80. Dev cost is more like at cost. It's really around about, you know, about sharing the risk. You're probably going to take a hit to your revenue share because of the sharing of the dev costs. Again, it's usually probably 100% back on you as a developer, but they'll kick in a percentage.
Yeah, we haven't actually done a second party deal, but we were negotiating a couple and it didn't quite make sense at the time. But usually they will negotiate a rate, like a man-month rate, and then they'll just flex up and down as you go.
Yeah.
So it's a different kind of agreement because you're working exclusively for one partner. But yeah.
I mean, if you're developing multiple games, be very careful what that exclusivity means. It's really about the exclusivity of the one product that you're developing for the publisher. Don't make it across the board because that could be terrible. Co-dev. So like your co-dev partner will contribute to total dev costs. Again, this is a negotiation that you'll have with the co-development publisher or partner. I guess the contribution of dev costs will probably determine what your rev share is going to be at the end of the day. So be prepared for that. You know, basically, this is you deciding where your risk is going to be. Like Phil says, we at Mighty Kingdom like to make sure that our dev is kind of covered, knowing that if things go wrong, we're still going to be okay, or that's where the risk starts to come back on us. The thing about co-dev is really about what resources or what things can you share to make a game successful, whether that's technology, whether that's relationships, whether that's, you know, brand. I mean, lots of different things. For us, it's important to make sure that we are connecting into all their capabilities. And you basically start building a relationship with not only the publisher, but their partners as well in a good relationship. We've got a couple of those that are really worth working well with us. Deal will probably include an aspirational bonus of some kind. Again, they generally want to motivate the team that's working on developing the game. So they'll put that into the contract.
You will notice that publishers, they really do believe that everyone is just motivated by money.
Yeah.
So they'll really try and dangle that carrot. Yeah, just be aware of that.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's a values thing. You know, we've actually had negotiations where we've argued against a sales bonus.
Yeah.
Odd, but you know, that's what's important to us for the rest of the deal. It can be pretty tricky. The real key thing with being co-dev is that you're both owners of the thing you're making. So make sure that the vision between your co-dev partner is absolutely clear, and it doesn't want to waver either way. We do have some co-dev partners. We understand where our contribution is going to be. We understand where they can do more for us or less for us, and then vice versa. But if you don't have a shared vision, it's going to be a pretty horrible partnership.
Yeah, and I'll say as well, the other thing that can be difficult in this sort of a deal is IP ownership at the end of it. Like it'll be one of the things that they will negotiate when it comes to the revenue share as well. So cost is one thing, like in terms of how much you put in, how much they put in, but also who owns what will be packed into that as well. So, you know, under a work for hire arrangement, the publisher owns all the IP. It's, you know, once it's done, it leaves and goes. Under licensing, a lot of the IP stays with you. Everything that's brand is theirs. Everything else is yours. And so in co-development, it's kind of somewhere in between.
Yeah. I mean, you get to choose, or
Yeah.
it's part of the negotiation. You know, do they get to keep all the tech at the end of the day, or can you reuse it? It depends on the partner. Cool. Yeah.
I don't know why I changed this slide. Sorry, that was me.
Acquisition. There's quite a bit of acquisition going on at the moment in games development. So be prepared to have that conversation as well. If you've got something in front of a publisher and whatever deal you're trying to strike, and they have a lot of belief, they see something in that, even if it's like location. Right now, Australia is looking pretty cool as a location for investment in games. They will straight up ask you, well, cool, this is the first path of the acquisition that we're trying to make of your studio or what your portfolio looks like. So be prepared for that conversation. If it's no, it's no. Be clear about that. If it's okay, let's think about it. Think about the terms of what that actually means. You know, are you going to be sharing a tech stack to be able to develop your game, or whatever those terms are? You know, but that's, I guess be prepared for the conversation because you're more than likely to have it.
And a no doesn't stop the deal. And I think sometimes probably in their mind they're going like, oh, when they see the numbers, they'll change their mind. But so they'll probably think they can convince you. But yeah, just you don't want to be caught blindsided by that question, I guess.
Yeah. So know about. I mean, I guess the trick is you're not just talking about the cash. You're talking about the people you work with every day. So you're looking for a relationship with a potential acquirer that's going to work for not just you, but work with your team as well.
I think another thing that's driving this acquisition push at the moment, and it's the same sort of thing that can help sort of push deals forward when you're just talking singularly product, is that publishers have a little bit of FOMO. They're worried that if they pass on your product or your this opportunity, that you'll go somewhere else and have success, and they could have had it. It's the old the Beatles all over again. The Elvis Presley, etc. So I think
they come back, by the way.
Yeah,
that's what we start.
Yeah. So just be they'll think like, if we partner with you and your product is a success, then you're going to have a lot of power to then negotiate a very good acquisition. So they want to start early so they can start managing expectations and making sure that they're the partner that's first in line when that conversation starts, if that's the path for you. Because they're all worried that in this environment where there's a lot of consolidation happening, they don't want to be the one publisher that's left with no partners. Yeah.
So that's publishers.
Oh, well, you're done. What's next? Mobile business console. Yeah, I wanted to touch on a little bit of this. And I think Tony sort of ran through it a bit as well. All publishers are very market driven. They're looking at the economics of the deal and how it stacks up. But what I've noticed is that mobile publishers are very, I guess you'd say, like short-term focused. They're very keen to look at your metrics, your retention, the marketing cost in terms of CPI, and the lifetime value of each of the customers that come in. They will benchmark you against other products in the market. The mobile market being what it is, it's very data driven. So they will have all this information. They'll have it they've memorized it all. They live it, they breathe it. They'll know it better than you do. And so I find like with mobile, they are sort of looking short term. They're looking at a way that they can scale your product by applying what they have, which is sort of a large amount of resources. They can bring a lot of customers in very quickly and then make that and realize that margin very, very quickly. And so for them, the quicker that you can get to ROAS, return on their advertising spend, so they put $1 in, how long does it take them to get $1 out? That's what seems to really light a fire under the mobile publishers. Or at least as long as team is very important to them as well, because again, it's a relationship they're getting into. But they're very, very metric focused. And I find that with the console or PC publishers, they tend to think longer term. They look at a product development over, it all obviously depends on how mature your product is when you bring it to them. But they look at that and they think, okay, we've got time to make changes. And they're more concerned about release windows and the timing of like what other things are happening in the market. So they seem to be more focused on team and relationship more so than I'd say mobile
capability. They want to make sure that you can deliver on what you're promising to.
Yeah, and I guess like mobile devs are as well, but it just feels like mobile publishers, but they seem to think like they can get resource quickly. Like most of mobile devs have a lot of monetization experts and marketing experts and all that sort of stuff. So publishers have that in their they'll have connections with them, so they'll be able to plug in the parts that they might see that you're missing. But they just like bang, 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 bang. They're like, you know, they'll be all hot, and then like, you know, you'll have 1 month where you metric dip, and then they're gone, and then you're like, oh, the conversation was going so well. Whereas it does seem that there's just a different time frame, a different expectation across those two parts of the market. As always, we're starting to see even that sort of start to overlap and consolidate. Top end of mobile is starting to overlap with that bottom end of console. We're starting to see premium come back into mobile in a way, with these Apple Arcade and other systems as well. So that market is still shifting. Yeah, well, so we're almost at the end. So we're running a little bit longer today. So I'll sort of do a quick note on investors. And we talked a lot about publishers, and these are very, like I say, they're like a marriage. It's a contract you get into, and ultimately that will either come to an end, either, you know, happily or poorly. But with an investor, like this could be an entire like 2-hour presentation about investors and their expectations and stuff. But the biggest word of caution there is an investor is a shareholder, and so you can't divorce them. Like, I don't know if there's any analogy of a marriage that you can't divorce, but it is incredibly difficult to remove an investor from your company once they're involved. So be extra cautious about bringing an investor on board. All the stuff we talk about values alignment and on that sort of stuff is supremely important here. You've got to make sure that your visions are aligned, that they're willing to go on the journey with you, they're willing to ride the ups and the downs, that they're patient. But this industry probably, you know, is one that if they've come from sort of tech investing, this one takes a lot more patience to realize these returns. So just be very, very careful before you go. Like this, as much as there's acquisition going on, that means that VCs and people are interested in this industry because they're like, cool, I can put $1 million into a studio and then get 10 million back in a year's time. That can sound fun on paper, but the reality of that is can be quite horrible, because they're going to be in your ear every day saying, when you're selling. So just be sure that you've got an investor or a partner on board that's got some domain experience and is willing to go on that journey. But yeah, summary. Yeah, so publishers, understand them, understand their values, their expertise, understand what it is that they want. Once you do that, you can understand how you can communicate with them and speak their language, so so to speak. I was going to say, allow myself to introduce myself. Make sure you treat it like a relationship. This is important, right? You got to be building a rapport with somebody over at the publishing studio that you're going to be interacting with them for a very, very long time. So make sure that you work on it as you would any other relationship, whether in life, whether it's in your studio or in your personal life. Be prepared. Like, walk into that meeting with the information in your pocket. Don't sort of go, oh, I didn't think of that, or maybe I'll get back to you. Like, they're going to want to move very quickly to a point where they can make a decision about your product and your team, about whether they want to continue the conversation or end it. And so the more bumps along that path, they're just going to be like, these guys don't know what they're doing. It erodes trust, and so therefore they'll probably pass, even if ultimately it would have been a good deal. So just do your homework there. Have a look at these slides. We'll get them to share via Jens, and understand the type of deal that you're looking for. Understand what they all are, and make sure that you're clear about with the publisher that this is the arrangement that you're seeking. Not all publishers will do all types of deals, but they will understand what they all are, and they'll understand why you want those things. So make sure you've got that information as well. And don't be afraid to negotiate. You've got what they want. You've got a game. You've got a product. They're a publisher. They need to publish something. So make sure that you don't just roll over in negotiations, that you can use that as leverage and play them off each other. These publishers, they all talk to each other. So you know, create that manufactured scarcity, and like get them to fight for you as much as you are fighting for them. And that's the conclusion of our publisher presentation.
Great. So thank you very much for those insights. Just like last time, here's an opportunity for you to ask questions. So either unmute yourself and ask in person, or if you're a bit shy, just put it in the chat.
Okay. I have a question straight up. So first off, thank you, gentlemen. Incredible overview of everything, and some really good insights, even though I've been in the industry for about a decade now. So I have a question, though. It's around, I suppose, what we're looking for as a developer. So we've got a small team that is mostly self-funded. So in the past few events, I've been pitching us as looking for distribution partners, because obviously we want to maintain the IP and maintain the revenue, all the reasons for that, and the split, and just look for somebody who's willing to invest like UA money, and then see a return. So is there a different overall strategy we should be using? Are we on the right track, or because we don't really fit into the mold of what most publishers are looking for?
Just a quick question there. Is this a mobile product, I guess?
Yeah, mobile one PC, both cross-platform. So yeah.
All right. I think like so there's a particular segment of the mobile market that you're probably addressing there, which is around UA marketing, and there are like I've got a name, God, I can't remember them, but they're basically like giant funds that once you've got the metrics to prove that it's profitable, they will pour money into behind you to make it work, and then you just pay a margin on. You pay them a cut of what you earn every month. And so yeah, that's probably more likely. Like it sounds more like what you want. The expectation there is that all of that marketing expertise and stuff is in-house. Like they will provide none of it. There are ones out there that will perhaps be part of it. But Superscale is one. Tilting Point is another. So some of them have publishing arms because no one ever does one thing, right? Everybody wants to do everything. But yeah, that seems like this is sort of like one of those situations where you bring a quite well-developed product and you've got metrics behind it and you're just looking for a partner for scale. That's a different sort of situation than looking for a traditional publisher where you're looking for completion funds or development funds. So there are particular parts of the market that do address that. And so, yeah, it doesn't sound like you like a traditional publisher, because the question they're going to ask is like, well, what's in it for me? It sounds like you just want my money and nothing else, right? And so you got to make sure that there's equal value, or at least some value going back to the publisher there. Look, if your numbers are insane and like they can see them, they can just see dollar signs, then they might go, you know what, here's my checkbook. But if your numbers were that insane, you probably wouldn't need to talk to them. So like there's a balance there, right? So yeah, I would if you flick me through an email, I've got a good friend who works at Superscale that can, or in warm introduction, I can give you there. Yeah, I think I missed it in the slides, but warm introductions are very much better than cold introductions when it comes to these things. Yeah, I think that would be how I would approach it if I was in this spot.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
All right, we have a question in the chat from Ben, and he's saying, my game is still in the early phase of pre-production, and I intend to self-fund a lot of the early development. How should I approach publishers at GDC if I want funding to complete, distribute, and market the game further down the road? Further, he's saying, well, I do want them to show the demo and build relationships with them so I can approach them again in the future. I don't want to be seen as wasting their time.
You're not wasting their time. That's their job. So yeah, never feel that you're wasting their time. This comes back to like, when you reach out and start and doing that work before the meeting, they'll tell you up front if it's not something that they'll look for in that. But remember, it is their job to find products like yours.
And it's good for being in that situation because they're going to be able to see progress. You might have that meeting and it just might be an introduction. You'll be able to show them what you've got. And then 3 months later, when you're meeting them again, this is what I've done since then. They can see that progression and they're more likely to talk to you further.
Yeah, and when you reach out to them, don't just drop a link to a itch.io and say, hey, check out my game. Like give them a bit of a pitch about who you are and why you're building this game, and what you think the market is and what you think they can bring to you, and ask them for some advice even in that initial email. Or if it's ideally if it's a Skype meeting or a face-to-face, even better. And then like Tony says, take that advice, fold it into your product, and then go back to them and say, hey, look, we spoke at GDC and we talked about this. Look, I've done this, and this is the difference it's made in my product. Because then they'll be like, oh well, this person actually listens to what I do, and listens to what I say, and actually takes it on board, and isn't. We talk a lot here about MK about decisions being either ego driven or product driven or customer driven. Like it's about understanding which is important and when. I think a lot of game development is ego driven, where it could probably be sort of data driven or product driven. And so what they're looking for is someone who's able to get past themselves and think more broadly about their product and how it fits in the market. So these are good opportunities to make changes. And again, like the earlier you start that conversation, the earlier you can make those changes, the easier it is for you because you spend less time going in the wrong direction. And yeah, like it sounds like like is it just a single person or is it a team there? Because I think like single developers, it's a bit tougher because the pressures of life, it can be variable, right? And so that it can mean progress can be quite slow. So you know, for everyone, I always say try and find a co-founder, try and find someone who can go on the journey with you, so that you're not just going to burn out. But that will be something that they will worry about. Not to say that no publisher will talk to a single dev. I was talking to who was a publisher for the what was that, Escapists. Anyway, I can't remember who the publisher was. Team 17 probably, or something like that. That's a single developer. He was a painter, and he was developing that in his spare time. And when they saw him, they were like, they could see the potential in what he was doing. And he had a sandbox, like a prison style sandbox and play. And they were like, if you just add these couple of things, we can see how this could turn into an actual game and be very, very popular. So they were able to put developer resource around them. You know, they're the Worms guys, right? Yeah. I've got the right people, yeah. So they're a company that's had a lot of success, and now their mantra is all about allowing other people's visions to come to market as well. So they're very creator driven as a publisher. So they're probably a very good fit for what you're doing. So definitely reach out to them. The bigger publishers probably will shy away from a solo developer. Anyway, I think I'm rambling a long way from the original question, but I hope there was some nuggets in there.
All right, we have another question on Twitch. Do you have any tips for what the very first contact with the publisher should look like / include?
That's going to be next week's presentation. Yeah, but I think in a nutshell, if you understand what the publisher is, who they are and what they do, and the sort of products that they create, that'll help you discover, help you put together a pitch. At the top line, they're going to look at who the team is, what capability they have, what experience they have, what the product is, what market it's going into, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and look, in your initial contact, you need to name those things and do it very succinctly. This is what our game is, 1 sentence worth of description. This is who our market is. This is what we're looking to do, in what time frame, and what cost. Great to talk to you about it more. And they will or they won't based on.
Yeah. Even in the initial reach out, you don't necessarily have to have cost in there, but you can give an indication of scale or size of what your final product looks like, and they'll start to draw the line together. Mainly because the only reason I'll say that is it's a trap that I've fallen into in the past, and is that you put a line in the sand when you say a cost, and then when you actually go and do the math and you realize that you've put it in the wrong spot, it's really hard to sort of negotiate up from a position. It's much easier to negotiate down. So that'll be my only advice there, is like, if you've done the hard work to understand your cost base and all that sort of stuff, then yeah, put the numbers in there and say, look, this is, and even a range. Ranges are good as well. Like to say, we see this as being between 250 and 350K. By the way, everyone talks USD, so just that's an easy way to build 40% margin into your numbers. Just put a USD in front of the $, and suddenly you're making more money.
Yeah, I've got a bit of a follow-on question. That how often do you cold call publishers, or do you try and wait for either a personal introduction, or what's your strategy around talking to publishers in that regards, or just getting that introduction to start with?
To make any kind of contact is the first thing.
I had you on mute.
Sorry, did you hear that question?
We did have a question. I think for us, it's really, look, have a reason why you want to speak to a publisher, which you will have, but be very clear what that reason is, whether it's going to be a meeting, whether it's going to be a discussion, whether it's going to be a pitch. Even if it's we're in the same place at the same time, I'd like to know more about your thing. Always lead with, this is why I'm contacting you, essentially.
Yeah, cold calling is real hard. But again, like, lean into the fact that this is their job, right? That this is what they do. Some of them have like forms and stuff that you can fill in on their websites. That's like the worst way to approach, you might find. But this industry is pretty small. Like, even via IGEA or via, I saw Matt Ditton on here before, and there's a few others who are around, who are even going on this trip, who have been in this industry for a while. And you can't be in this industry for any period of time without making connections, and those connections start to move around and start to bounce around, and you'll start to build a network, and you can leverage other people's networks. Like for us, if I think back personally to our journey there, for the first sort of 2 GDCs we went to, all we did was just talk to people, other developers. Like we didn't have anything to show. We didn't actually bring any product. We were just there because part of it was, I think, is just being in the room, and you talk to people. You find people who are cool, find people who are not cool, and you talk about what you do and where you're from, and then people will be like, oh, have you talked to so and so? I think they might be interesting. And it starts to sort of develop from there. We had a couple of sort of fortuitous circumstances in our early life that sort of gave us that sort of kickstart. And once we'd shown expertise in one area, a lot of that stuff started to become easier. But to get that first one, I think it's like, like think about your own life, right? How many times have you answered a cold email that just turned up in your mailbox versus a friend saying, hey, you should, a friend of mine here is interested in what you do. Do you want to have a coffee? It's like, you're far more likely to go for the second one. So try and build those bridges through the networks that you have. And industry bodies like IGEA and GDAA, that's their purpose, right? That's part of their mantra, or part of their mandate, is to help companies build those connections. So don't be afraid to lean in there as well.
Indeed. I think we might have time for one more brief question.
I can stay a little bit longer. I've got nothing to do.
Yeah, I don't know if mine's going to be brief, but I thought maybe you'd have a few words on, options between pulling in funding for a studio as opposed to just funding for individual titles. So let's say that we had a roadmap of 3 mobile titles to release in 2021. Is there a way to leverage that? Having a diverse portfolio, or the sum being greater than a whole, or anything around that.
Yeah, so you can, like one way to do it is sort of like a traditional investor funding model, right? Like a studio funding. And like some publishers do that sort of stuff, and there are sort of specialist investors out there. But like I say, having an investor on board, having a shareholder on board brings a lot of other baggage. So I would suggest avoiding that. But what you're kind of talking there is sort of like slate funding, where they're looking at, this again comes down to when you've got a very good relationship with a publisher, and usually this comes after you've worked with them once before. Yeah. Then you can start the conversation of, and we've done this in the past, where as you're partway through development and then you've got the relationship working, they see the quality of the product you've got. That's when you can start having the whole conversation around, look, the nature of this industry is not every game is going to be a success, but it would be a shame to throw away all this technology and this relationship and stuff just because one product didn't hit the market. Is there an opportunity here for us to look at 2, 3, 4 products? And as we sort of near the end of this one, we can start our pre-prod and work together on what the next one is. I mean, it sounds like you've already got a few products in the pipeline or a pathway there, which is, when you talk to a publisher now, they're going to, if you start talking in the first meeting about 3, 4, 5 products, they're going to be like, whoa, slow down a bit. So you've got to earn your shot in that regard. Slate funding does exist, and that's, you're getting closer to what is more like a second party. And that will definitely open a conversation towards acquisition, because ultimately, if they're putting that much money into a studio and they know you're making a margin on that dev, then they're going to know, because they're not silly. They're going to say, why do we keep paying this margin to the studio? Why don't we just buy them? So be prepared for that to be the outcome of that conversation if you're looking for slate funding. So yeah, it can happen.
Yeah, but it is most likely to happen after you've done something with them previously.
And doing something with them doesn't mean doing something successful. It just means doing something, because they're going to know that not every product is going to be a winner. But what they want to know is that the team that they work with can get there, right? Like they want to know that they have a good relationship, a good working relationship with you, and that they believe that with the right mix of ingredients and marketing and timing and everything, that you will be able to hit it. So yeah, like that's what would be my strategy there. Focus on the first deal, and then while that first deal is working, as in it's underway and doing really well, then start to crack the door on that.
But certainly let them know that you're looking for a long-term relationship.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, look, it's one of the things we always talk about, right? Is like, we don't look at a deal as transactional. We look at how this being a relationship that we build over time, that we both realize value from, right? And acknowledging that what their motivators are, and then telling them what yours are. It's a much easier way to start a relationship off than sort of trying to sort of hide and say, surprise, I got this other thing I was going to do that I haven't told you about, and suddenly, it's a swerve for them. So you can be open about it, and I wouldn't put 3 products in front of them. I'd put 1. That's just that's just me. Because I think the question will be like, why don't you just focus on doing one thing well? Why are you trying to focus on 3 things? which is a funny thing for us because we do like 5 things, but that's a different, you know, that's just us. Don't be us.
Yeah, we have all those deals at once.
But yeah, so yeah, I think it's possible. It's a trickier road, and but yeah, I mean, they're all hard. Come on, let's be honest here. It's all good. This is games. Nothing's easy. But yeah, I think you can do it.
Yeah, awesome. Really great advice. Thanks for your time.
Anytime.
Do you have time for one more question?
Of course.
All right, cool. So someone on Twitch is asking, what are your thoughts on crowdfunding for a small group of indie devs?
They're not publishers. Look, I think it's good. It can be good. It's almost like a marketing challenge. I see. Like, you're trying to pre-sell a product. It's like pre-sales.
Yeah.
It's what it's sort of become. We've dabbled in crowdfunding. It comes with its own set of hang-ups, and like when you're dealing with a publisher, you've got usually or like 1 or 2 people on their side that you're dealing with, and that's your main interaction. When you're crowdfunding, you've got hundreds of people you have to manage, and so it becomes an issue of like time. It just takes so much time to keep that updated and keep it rolling and not stop people getting angry. And you know, crowdfunding comes with refunds and funds, you know, like people pulling out and stuff. Publishers don't usually come back and try and take money off you. You know, normally once it's gone, it's gone. So it just comes with a whole series of complexities that for us has never really sort of made sense. And particularly in mobile, I've yet to see a successfully crowdfunded mobile product. I'm happy to be proven wrong. I'm sure they're out there. So it's much more likely to occur in sort of console or PC space. But you know, it's to me, it sort of leans into close to like early access and stuff like that as well. Like there's you can build a pathway from crowdfunding to early access to release. You know, and it can be good when you talk to publishers with a crowdfunding success behind you, because it kind of proves part of the equation, right? Because one of the things I'll be doing is like, how do I market this product? Is there a market for this product? Are people going to buy this? And you can say, look, we only had a concept and we've got 100,000 people who put $1 in or whatever it is. That can be very compelling. The problem is that if it doesn't work, now you've got a record where the publisher is going to Google your product and be like, why did the crowdfunding fail? And that's a question you have to answer. So yeah, like crowdfunding is just sort of a very different path and a very different stream. And it suits very particular products. And I would almost even say, you know, this is me just going out on the wild here, that the heydays of crowdfunding for games is sort of past. And that, you know, one of the things it did, so I'm going right off script now, is that it kind of started to adjust the conversations with publishers. Like there's been a few of these moments in time where, like when the iPhone came out and the total cost of the ability to access that market, you know, the barrier for entry was so low. The console publishers and everybody started changing their models to try and allow more content in. Right? Like look at what Steam's done from being a completely curated platform to being a completely open platform. Crowdfunding sort of did a similar thing. They, you know, it changed the way publishers looked at product, and it gave them, you know, there were things that happened on crowdfunding that publishers missed because they passed on it, and then they became successes, right? And so they're like, okay, maybe we need to update our models to make sure we're not missing these things again. And so I think that's why we've seen sort of crowdfunding successes drop, because publishers are starting to fill that gap again. So that's not to say don't do it, but just be fully cognizant of the requirements that it brings and the management. There's been a couple, like the Hollow Knight guys did really well with crowdfunding. XO1, I'm just thinking of people locally because they're all just across the road. But talk to them, reach out to them, talk to them about the pros and the cons that they see of it. Go in with your eyes open with everything, right? Do your research. Don't just think it's free money, because it's not. It comes with a whole bunch of obligations, and make sure that you're prepared to meet those obligations.
Cool. One more?
Yeah, man.
All right. Okay. So someone on Twitch is asking, if there is a time, how early is too early to show a concept for a game to a publisher, to get the conversation going, to gauge interest? Is it a technology basis with some systems working, or is a game on paper too early? Can that work sometimes?
Well, look, it's funny because there's no one true answer to this question, right? And the reason, and I'll say as well, it's different at different stages of your business. Like if you are like Bungie and you've done Destiny, and you turn up to Activision. God, are they Activision? I don't know who they are. Anyway, you turn up to a publisher and you've just got a piece of paper that says, we're making a game. They'll give you all the money that you need to make a game, right? So, so it does change as your business changes. Early on, when you don't have that reputation, don't have that track record, the more you can show, the better, because it's de-risking in their minds. Because if you don't have a track record that they can point to, you know, like I always try and say show as early as possible, because publishers love to give feedback early and be able to sort of shape a product in a way that they think is valuable. We've done paper pitches before that have got up, but we've done it because we can say, hey, we did this and we did this, and now we're pitching this, and they're like, cool, we can draw the line and we can make that happen.
Yeah, we have a minimum of having some concept art if we're doing a paper pitch. We have a pretty good idea of what the design's going to look like. So we have basically almost a draft GDD. We go on with that. And
like, you know, you can hear stories about like the Horizon people just doing concept art of cool looking robots, and then they got greenlit. And it's like, yeah, but you guys did do Killzone and all those other things. So, you know, like it becomes easier as you've got that track record. So starting out green, I wouldn't send like paper pitches unless you've got concept art that is like legit awesome. And when I say legit awesome, it's not just like because you really like your mate Barry's, you know, he draws good pictures, but you've actually gone out and vetted that against, you know, again, this is where IGEA, GDA, and the networks that you have locally can help. Get past that looks nice to the real honest feedback, and you know, and there's a lot of what's the word? Everybody wants everyone to succeed, right? So everybody wants to say nice things to people all the time. So it can be often hard to get that critical feedback that you need, but that's what you want at all times from a publisher, from your community or whatever. So get outside your comfort zone, get outside your circle, and talk to people who don't have a vested interest in you or your success. Because if a publisher looks at something and they don't like it, they'll tell you. And it can be hard to sort of swing them back around. Like if you come and say like, we've got awesome artwork, and then you show them something that's a programmer art. I'm a programmer, so I know how bad I am. They're going to be like, no, you don't. And then you're going to have to overcome that hurdle every time you talk to them. So like do the hard work of vetting it before you go to them. You know, depending on where you are as well, sometimes you can have that conversation where you're like, you know, this is where I've come from. These are the capabilities that I have personally, or our studio has. Where do you see as what is the next opportunity? What should we be focusing our attention on? And that's a valid conversation to have with the publisher early. But then just be prepared to like go away and do 6 months of work to hit the, you know, to address their feedback and then come back with something tangible. For consoles, I find that they love to touch things. We have like an escalating thing where it's like, you know, text is good, images are better, an animated or a video is even better again, and playable is best. And playable in that market is not art. Like they don't look at art. They just look at what's the gameplay. What is this going to be fun? If I'm going to sell a 100-hour experience to somebody, and they're going to be doing this thing, like, is this thing fun? So it's very mechanics driven. You know, again, mobile is very different. What are your numbers? What are your metrics? What's your day one? So like that's a whole different question. Mobile, don't turn up with a paper pitch. They want to see a product. Because the barrier to entry there is so low, right? They realize that like you can get something put together very, very quickly. So they want to see something. But yeah, like I would say it's never too early. And if it's a warm introduction and it's in a social setting, then you can talk with just through concepts. But if you're sitting down at GDC for a meeting, you want to have something tangible from to touch and play.
Yep. Other one gets advice is always know your player. What's the player fantasy? You know, here's a demographic you're pitching to. That gives them like a ballpark to go, this is what I'm aiming at. If I've got 50 other games with that ballpark, I'm going to be less interested.
And the reason they ask that question is they want to know that you're thinking beyond yourself, that you're thinking of, this is actually a product that has to live in a market and it has to actually be sold. And so that you've done the hard work to think about, you know, how hard their job is going to be, right? And so that you're helping them make that as easy as possible. So, yeah.
Cool. I haven't seen any further questions in the chat or on Twitch. So here is your last chance, everyone.
Yeah, I'll slide another quick one in. Okay, so talking about traditional investment. So you're saying you would never, ever recommend an investor who does not have domain expertise?
No, I wouldn't say never, ever.
Okay.
I guess the advice is understand what they were looking for in the investment.
Yes.
If they're looking for an IPO of your company within 2 years, know if that's the right thing for you. If they're looking for a return in 6 months of the investment, make sure you can do that. So it really comes down to having very clear alignment on what their expectations of their investment is getting for them.
Yeah, and I'll say, like, the reason I would say look for some of the domain expertise, because it just means that a lot of the conversations are easier because they will be able to understand the context of what you're doing and why you're doing it. And oftentimes we'll be able to connect you with some people who are very good. That's not to say that people who are outside of games don't have valuable connections as well. Quite often I'll find that they are very good at some of the things that game companies aren't very good at, in terms of corporate structure, finance, and a whole bunch of other things, governance. Yeah, so these are all really, really important things, particularly as your company grows and scales, if that's the path of your company, right? So just understand what the strengths of the investors are and what your strengths are, and make sure that your goals are aligned and the timelines are aligned, and then it can work. I think that the golden investor is one who has got domain expertise and deep pockets and a long view. Like that's the gold standard, right? But they're rare, and they're in demand, so they're going to have a lot of options in front of them. But I think, like, investment is complex, right? Again, like, this is like a whole other presentation about how to understand when it's valuable and why and what it does. There is a bit of a gold rush at the moment around money flying into game companies. You see every day, you look at GameIndustry.biz, and it's like so-and-so raised 1.5, so-and-so raised 9 mil, so-and-so raised 20 mil. Like, it can feel like you want to jump on that bandwagon. But almost always, like, every investor is looking for an exit, right? They're putting money in and they want to get more money out. So you need to understand how you're going to get that money out, how you're going to give it to them. So that is either an acquisition, buyback, an IPO, like whatever the exit is. You have to be clear with both of you that you're on board for that same exit event, because that's significant, right? Like, selling your company is an acquisition is a big change from someone like, for me, I've been doing this for 10 years on my own, right? Like, an acquisition seems crazy to suddenly have a job. It's just odd. But at the same time, very compelling to have someone else worry about all the bills. But so just understand the path that you're on, where that ends, and make sure that you're aligned. And like I say, the reason I would lean towards industry is that would be first preference, right? That doesn't mean that you don't take external money from non-traditional investment, but just understand the risks that come with that, or at least the effort that's going to come to be able to get them to understand what's important to your business. What the product cycles are, what the metrics are, and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, great. I appreciate the chance to pick your brain.
Yeah, all good.
Right.
Okay.
We do have 2 more questions on Twitch.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Now I'm going to check my schedule. I'm pretty good. Tony, you have to duck? All right, you go. I'm going to hang out. Tony's going to go.
Bye.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks for coming along. Thanks for your time. All right. So someone put on Twitch, it seems counterintuitive. You need a fully fleshed out mobile game with 40% day one retention. Almost seems like you don't need publishing, just more people sharing the game. What does a publisher do other than advertise your game from that point?
Ooh, that's a tricky one. Yeah, look, mobile's in a funny spot. I think, like, when you go to a mobile publisher, you don't often have a game that's 40, 50, 60% day one, right? You've got a product that has been, it's got some metrics, or at least, day one is one part of the equation. Day 7, day 30, day 180, day 360. Like, these are the parts that are, that are what ultimately drives the success of your product, right? How many people are still playing it a year after you released it? So mobile publisher, you do need to come with something, right? You need to understand what part of the market you're addressing, what the metrics are at a base level. They'll look at that and they'll see, like, where can we make improvements? Where can we make adjustments? They'll look at your product and look at your core loop, and then they'll look at the current market trends and say, look, we can put an incentivized ad in here, or some of the things else over there. So we use a mobile publisher for our product Wildlife, so and that's got a very good day one. That had really good retention curve. But we were also very conscious of the fact that our expertise was not in performance marketing, right? We didn't know how to find customers at a very efficient and cheap rate. I mean, we kind of knew mechanically how to do it, but our skill set wasn't developed enough to be able to do it at scale. And so Rogue were able to put people in there who have done it at scale. The founder of Rogue did Marvel Contest of Champions, which if you Google it, it did okay. He's done all right for himself. And so, they have a track record there. They, one of the things you'll find is getting into the nitty gritty, but in Australia, a lot of the platform partners that you work with, and which do drive a lot of the success of your product by store presence and store visibility and stuff like that. We work a lot with the local partners. We work a lot with Australian representatives for those companies. But when it comes to global presence, they advocate for you back to the mothership, but you're part of you're very much an Australian developer and being managed by the Australian representatives. When you have a US publisher or a European publisher, you get access to those markets. And for us, for wildlife, most of our users are in the US. And so having someone who has a relationship with the platform partners in the US, who's on their time zone, who can go out to coffee with them or to dinner or whatever, at short notice, it's allowed us to have an access to these partners in a way that we couldn't otherwise have. So that's part of it as well. And the other part is financial, right? Like we sort of made the decision that for us to be able to effectively market this product, I talked a little bit before about advertising spend and the return on it, right? So the real massive games that you see out there, they'll have a advertising return or ROAS of around like 30 days or less, right? So it means that they put $1 in and within 30 days they've got that dollar back. Once you're down at that level, it is just a scale problem. Like how much money can you pour in versus how much money you get out. We're wildlife and casual puzzle. It's not that short, our ROAS. Like it is positive, but it takes longer. We don't have the pockets deep enough to be able to fund it for long enough to get that scale and that uplift. Whereas Rogue does, right? That's part of what they provide. So they provide expertise in terms of marketing. They provide UA spend, and they have monetization experts as well, which is another area. Like I'd say the Australian industry is very, very good at being creative and coming up with cool and compelling and unique sort of gameplay. But when it comes to sort of monetization and marketing, we're still very, compared to the rest of the world, we've still got a long way to go. We look at that through our lens. Again, this comes back to understanding your company and understanding the vision of what you're trying to build. We looked at that and said, for us, it makes more sense for us to invest in product and in developing our differentiators, which is around narrative and other things, than it is in then developing that particular part of the business here. So we pay a margin, obviously, like every dollar comes in, a percentage of it goes off to Rogue. But those are dollars we wouldn't have got because we didn't have the expertise or the scale to be able to bring them in at all. And they're also out there negotiating on our behalf in terms of other markets that we don't traditionally get into, right? So they look for opportunities in other ways. They understand what we're trying to build and the vision of our company, and they're out there advocating on our behalf to create more opportunities for us and bringing them in the door. So that it goes beyond just even the nature of that one product and that one, just wildlife. I hope that helps answer the question a little bit.
All right, Phil, we have one more.
Yeah.
Is that all right? That
good.
is,
My stomach is grumbling a little bit, but that's fine.
Same here. But so again, on Twitch, one other question might be, do you have any publisher names off the top of your head who might suit smaller indie projects for PC/console with a more niche audience? Publishers like Team 17, Devolver, Panic, etc. Games in the vein of an immersive first-person roguelike game.
You pretty much just tick the ones I was going to suggest. Like Team 17 actually, like every person I've interacted with from that publisher has been fantastic. So like if you get a chance to talk to them, definitely take it. We've been very mobile focused for a long period of time. We're starting to branch out and look at console stuff now, and we're having some active conversations. Like that's where Tony's off to right now, right? About some other bigger stuff that we're pitching for. So like that's not my area of expertise, unfortunately. So I can't really recommend too many. So I can only just go through the lens of the conversations I've had and the people that I've had. I would say that if Team 17 seems to be like my number one recommendation. I already name checked them earlier, but I'd say the event Gamescom. I don't know if we'll be doing IGEA sort of matchmaking stuff for Gamescom as well. But that really is the big conference to go to, where you can meet like hundreds of developers, hundreds of publishers, sorry, in a very short space of time, in an environment where it's designed to very quickly get to the crux of a business decision. It's an environment where you have a half-hour window. So you sign up for a tool, you advertise, you put up there what your game is, what market you're looking at, and what services you're looking for. And so in this case, we'll be publishing. And then publishers go in there and they crawl down the list of all the people, and then they just send out requests for who they want to meet, and you can do vice versa. And in that environment, everyone almost always says yes if you can sort of clearly articulate, this is my product, this is where I think it is, and this is why I think we're a fit. They'll take the conversation because it's only half an hour, it moves very quick. It's probably the best event, I think, to get business done. Like it feels like everything is on fast forward. GDC is very different in that regard. The publishers are there, the people are there, but it's very developer focused. You'll find a lot more devs that are there. And obviously the talks are great. If you get to, I haven't been to a talk in like 3 years, I think. But if you get to, that's great for professional development. For business development, it's probably, it's good, but not as good as Gamescom. But if you're heading off to GDC, which is I assume why you're here on this chat, and you've got that sort of game, like, remember, you're not just showing it to publishers, you're showing it to the other developers as well, other people who are there, because they'll be working for companies that have had games published, and so they'll be able to make the connections and draw the dots for you as well. So yeah, it's like there's no one true partner, I can't sit here and say this is the perfect partner for you, because there'll be a lot of other considerations that you'll have to put into place around what your vision is and what your company is and how that matches up with the publisher. So you might find that Team 17 doesn't match up because of some particular thing they do or the way they operate, in which case my advice is just sort of can be sort of dismissed. But I think there are, for smaller products, there are lots and lots and lots of sort of small and niche publishers around now, more so than there were when I started out. But the buyer beware there is just to make sure that they have the capability and the expertise to be able to add value to your product and actually take it to market in a way that will cut through the noise and give you an opportunity for success, right? Like ultimately, the thing here we don't talk about in all these conversations is that you have to be making good product, you have to be making good games, right? That no games company is built on shoddy product. So you have to have that part of it tied up, and then the rest of the stuff sort of falls into place afterwards. Yeah. I think that's it.
All right. Look, thank you very much for your time. And again, thank Tony as well. Thank you for the insights. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you everyone for coming along. I'm looking forward to seeing you again at the third webinar. That one's going to be on pitching. Same time, same link. So thanks all for coming along. And again, thanks Phil and Tony, greatly appreciate it.
Oh, good.
See you next time, folks. Bye.